Good afternoon. So today we're going to handle another question. Again, it's by Jackson, and it's a question that I got on Facebook. And the question was, who are these guys who attacked us at Riverside, 14 Riverside, right? And why did they attack us? So yesterday I dealt with who these guys were. Today I'm dealing with why did they attack us, right? And I had three reasons why they attacked us. One was because of power, the other one was because of identity, and the other one was because of God, right? So I want to break this down and hopefully it will be enlightening. So let me just begin. So when it comes to power, right? Why do people seek power? And what is power? Let me just move into what is power, right? So there's a guy, his called is Meldik Sokri, right? And he defined power in this way, right? He explained power in this way. When a man seeks power, power affects the process, right? When a man wields power, right? Power is the man. And I wanted to give an example of this using William Ruto, right? William Ruto is seeking power. So power around him will affect him. Whatever Raila does, whatever Uhuru does, everything would affect him because he's seeking power. And he would be affected by processes, by powerful players in these processes. Example, the handshake manenos. His guys are really shaken by that handshake manenos. And so that would give you an example of how power would a person seeking power would be affected by power. So let's go into, like, when a man wields power, then power is the man. I wanted to give an example of Noah Wekesa. Back in the day, Noah Wekesa said something about Raila Odinga. He said that Raila Odinga has some questions to answer about corruption scandals. And I think he was talking about the maize scandal. And Kibaki was furious at this guy. And during a cabinet meeting, he rebuked Noah Wekesa, right? He rebuked him completely. And so Noah Wekesa came out and he apologized to Raila Odinga. And actually, I think that was the first time that had been done in Kenya. Another person apologizing to another person. So that was interesting, right? And it would show you that Kibaki is, that when a man wields power, power is the man. That Kibaki was power and power was Kibaki. And if he was angry, then you better do something to make him a bit happy. So that goes to another definition of by Max Weber. And this is how he defined power in another way, right? Power is the probability that one actor, right, in a relationship will be in a position to carry out his own will despite resistance. And it's regardless of the basis on which that probability rests, right? Because in this case, the probability of power rested on Kibaki being the president. And so that's why Noah Wekesa had to act in tune with what the president felt that was right. And Kibaki got Wekesa to do something against Wekesa's own instinct, his own will, right? Because he was powerful. And that would give you a definition of power. So Al-Shabaab, what they are seeking is power. So anyway, just to continue, right? Here's an interesting story. The number of presidents that Somalia has had since independence is 9. They have had 9 presidents. Kenya, we've had a couple of fewer presidents than those guys. So anyway, president number 7, right, was chairman of the Islamic Courts Union. Now, Al-Shabaab, it was an armed outfit of the Islamic Courts Union, right? So this guy was chairman of a union that had Al-Shabaab as its armed outfit. And he became president of Somalia. So you kind of like see how it goes round, right? So anyway, there was a transitional federal government. It was initiated in 2004. It turned over to the federal government in 2012, right? It was formed in Mbagathi in Nairobi. So that was interesting, right? I think we made fun of it because a government is being formed here and it's supposed to be the government of Somalia. The Islamic Courts Union, they were actually fighting against this government because they felt that this government was poor, was weak, right? And it would not have any impact on on Somalia, and they felt that they were strong enough, they had the power, and they had the means to change Somalia. And this president, his name was Sharif what? Sheikh Sharif. He was part of that. Sheikh Ahmed. He was part of that Islamic court union that felt that the transitional federal government was just all talk and nothing else, right? So he felt that he could have power through the Islamic court union, right? But then Ethiopia had some other plans, right? Because it invaded Somalia, and it invaded to help the transitional federal government, the government that was being formed in Bagathi, Nairobi, right? So Ethiopia stepped in, it helped this transitional federal government, it took the Islamic court union outside of Mogadishu and other towns. That invasion was in 2006. So in 2007, Kenya detained this guy who was to become president of Somalia, Sheikh Sharif, at the border between Kenya and Somalia. That was in January 2007. So do you see how it's all going in circles, right? Guy is part of the Islamic Courts Union, whose armed outfit is Al-Shabaab. He moves against the transitional federal government, which is being formed in Kenya. Ethiopia moves and to support the transitional federal government in Somalia, and so now the transitional federal government can go and take hold of power from the Islamic courts in Somalia. Kenya arrests this guy who is to become president of Somalia in future, who was part of the Islamic courts at that time. So anyway, Sheikh Sharif, he talks with the United States, right? He goes to Yemen, and he goes with some other guys from the Islamic Courts Union, and the less militant guys, because there are other guys who were not hearing it, right? They were not hearing it. So he goes with some other guys over there. They form a political party in Djibouti, and they sign a peace treaty with the transitional federal government. So this guy has gone full circle from fighting the transitional federal government to signing a treaty with them. And again, remember, when a person is seeking power, power affects the process. So this guy was being affected by power plays from Ethiopia, from Nairobi here in Kenya, from the US, because he had to meet with the US ambassador. He had to go to Yemen. He had to go to Djibouti, right? So power is affecting the process when you are seeking power. So these guys were seeking power, right? So anyway, he signs a treaty with the transitional federal government. They do what? They expand parliament, and then he becomes president of the transitional federal government of Somalia. So this guy has gone full circle and is finally at the seat of power. So what happens to the other guys? The Al-Shabaab and the other guys of the Islamic Courts Union, right? So those guys, they move to the south and the west of Somalia. Now, remember that the south of Somalia is the one that has a problem. The former Italian Somaliland, but now mostly the south. That's where most of the problems occur. So these guys, Al-Shabaab, they go there and they established their own power over there. Remember, when a man wields power, power is the man. So where Al-Shabaab is, power is them, and Al-Shabaab is power. You get? So these guys, they impose kind of like rules, arbitrary, and kind of like, others are kind of like funny, because they imposed a single-use plastic bag, a ban on plastic bags. Like Kenya, we're implementing it, right? These guys implemented it they implemented it this year in July 2018, which was a bit hilarious. As in, you guys there's so much, but you guys are concerned about plastic bags. That's very, very interesting, but it appeals to the liberals. So anyway, they did that, and then they like the pirates who operate within their areas. These guys demand, I think, 20% of the ransom payments from those pirates, right? So again, it's about power, and you are in your territory. Power is the man, and man is the power. You are going to do what they want you to do, right? So that was Al-Shabaab, and I think that's all power. As we can see, wherever they go, they form power. They move as much as they want. They don't have sort of like a very, very hardline stance. They just have a stance that would get them as closest to power as possible and as much power as possible. So that's one of the reasons why they fight. Now, other people have fought for power before, right? Like in Kenya, always remember that power is a means to an end. There's always an objective at play. So what is usually the objective? Like in Rome, what they had as an objective was for the glory of Rome. That's why they usually fought. And that's why Julius Caesar wanted to be so great, because to be remembered by everybody, right? Pompey was also fighting for the same thing, because he was kind of like remembered as one of the greatest generals, I think, for his campaigns in Syria and all of those other things. I'm trying to remember the Roman generals, right? So you remember those things. Vercingetorix, he's always remembered as the greatest fighter of the Gauls, right? So for memory and all of those things. So the British, when they came, they fought for queen and country. The US, they always speak about fighting for freedom. Like the operation they launched in Somalia, I think it was called Operation Enduring Freedom, right? For Kenya, who do we fight? We fight for Baba, don't we? I'm just saying. Or we fight for Udhamaki, whatever. So anyway, people fight for a lot of reasons. These guys fight for power, to do certain kinds of stuff, to wield it so that they can, move resources as they wish, gain as much resources as they wish. Because this guys was 20% of future ransoms on pirates, right? And then there was like the charcoal business. They had control over it very well. And then KDF at some point, guys were saying that we were colluding with Al-Shabaab to sell charcoal, right? So power and money, they go hand in hand, right? Don't you think so? Now, there's another objective that these guys have in play. Again, you remember, the Romans did it for the glory of Rome, to expand the empire. And this guy, they are doing it so that they can establish a caliphate, like ISIS was trying to do in Syria and Iraq, what they call the Levant, right? So these guys are also trying to do that. So it's not just power, but power towards a certain objective. Either money, either just to build it because you want to have it, or for prestige purposes, or to build a caliphate because there's something you're aiming for. A caliphate, the end times. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So anyway, let's go to the second point, right? Right now I'm on identity. That these guys, they fight for identity, right? And I think we all remember the Maslow hierarchy of needs. There are the basic needs, psychological needs, and self-fulfillment needs, right? Now, for the psychological needs, there was belonging, a sense of self-belonging, where you're looking for friends, you're looking for family, you're looking for somewhere to belong. And then there are esteem needs. You're looking for a feeling of accomplishment. And then once you get it now, you'll get to self-actualization, right? The basic needs, they're obvious: food, shelter, warming, and clothing. And then there's security, like you need to be secure. So just imagine yourself, right? You already have food, you already have shelter, you already have clothing. So why are so many people still worried? Why? Why would you want to move to another area? Perhaps because of security. So you're moving to a higher hierarchy of need. And then when you get security, you get food, shelter, and clothing, and all of those things. Then why are people so disturbed in their hearts? Why are people still seeking after, let's say, a relationship? Why are people still trying to be part of a crowd? Why are people trying to be part of Jubilee or part of ODM? When you know those, they are just stupid groups, right? So why would people want that, right? Why are people so keen on being, like, for me, going to church and being, let's say, a Catholic? Why are other people so keen on being Muslim? Because there's that need. We want to belong. And when we have all of those things, we belong, right? Yes, we're in the group. And then now we want to do other things. We want to do projects. We want to build something. We want to make a name for ourselves because we want to accomplish something. So human beings are always striving towards something. And it's not, terrorists are still human beings. And they are seeking towards accomplishing something. They're seeking towards belonging. Having food, shelter, and clothing is not enough for them. Having safety and security is not enough for them. As it is not enough for us. They're looking for something more. And the next hierarchy of needs, after you have all this basic and safety and security, is a sense of self-belonging. And then now you move to you move to accomplishment and then self-actualization, right? So what is social identity? Identity is the self-concept that you derive from being within a specific group. Like, how do you see yourself in a group? Let me give you an example, right? Think about yourself. Do you belong in any group, right? What does it take to be in that group? Like in the past, right? Did you try and hang around with the cool kids? Some people actually had to buy their way in. Like, they had to buy drinks, they had to buy, like for kids, they had to have the bikes and all of those things so that they could fit into those groups, right? And that's a bit difficult for humans because we're not built for that. We want to be cared for who we are, not for what we have. So when you belong to a group and you really have to do a lot to fit in, you look for another group, right? And then do you add value to that group, the group that you're in? There are people who are within a group, right? But they never contribute to that group. Or people feel that they never contribute to that group. Will people miss you when you move from that group? Like, will they notice that you are gone? And if they won't notice, then why are you still in that group? You look for another one. To be rooted is perhaps the most important and least recognized need of the human soul. You need to be rooted somewhere where you are giving nourishment to the tree. And if you're not rooted, as this guy says, it's called Simon Well, then you're not fulfilling a fundamental need of the soul. And so your soul will look for somewhere else. Now, where the group that you're in right now, right? Do you detest the group? Because there's some people who are in a group and they really, really hate that group. They really hate perhaps a specific person in that group and they can't do anything about it, right? Because they still have to fit in. They still have to be there. They still have to endure for just some time, just some bit of time. And I think this one was evident mostly in high school and in campus, right? Because people who are parts of groups, certain groups, they actually were part of them just to survive being in high school or being in campus. But then afterwards, those groups no longer became useful, right? Because they were just temporary, for just a bit of time. So think about yourselves, like your best friends in campus. Do you guys still talk? Your best friend in high school, do you guys still talk? Was it a temporary group for a temporary purpose? Like right now, where you are right now, like in the church group that you're in, or in the chama that you're in, or in the like office group that you're in, right? Is it a temporary group? Are you just tolerating being there, or do you want to be there? Some people seek another group where they don't feel hatred towards a certain person all the time within that group, right? So anyway, they say that loneliness is the only real disability. Being somewhere does not mean that you're not lonely. And it's the same for this case, for this terrorist. They can be in our society, but our society is so alien to them that they're looking for somewhere else. Somewhere else where they can fit in, where they don't have to force themselves in, right? Perhaps where somebody is actually looking for them to come in. You get that idea? They want somewhere where they can belong. Fitting in Kenyan society is very, very, very hard. Ask a Rastaman, he will tell you. Because everybody wants you to be like this way or like that way, right? But you can't be. It is especially difficult when we have rigid social classes. And like I did some time before, like in the US, only 4% of the guys who are born poor will escape from poverty, or will escape into the middle class, right? That was in the US. So in Kenya, I don't have the figures for that. But you can see how it goes. That somebody would be trying all that he can to escape into that level, but he can't do it. But then there's this other person who's trying to look for them, who's trying to ask them where they are, who's trying to encourage, come for us, we'll talk to you, trying to be their friend. Are you trying to be the friends to the guys in your group? So these guys, they'll feel lonely and they look for a place where they don't have to feel lonely, where they feel accepted without doing anything to become accepted. So anyway, would you join another group where they would accept you? The thoughts start coming into your head, especially where you're in a, let's say, a hypocritical society, and somebody somewhere is telling you about how this society is hypocritical, and you can actually see it, telling you how you can do something about it, and you can actually see it, and telling you how you can get to heaven while doing it, and you can believe it, because you're tired of this. You're tired of this country. You're tired of this society that won't accept you, that won't let you in. So you look for another society. And then when you look for that society, you have to ask yourself, what is the cost of acceptance into that society? Is it more costly than the one you'll have to face for you trying to fit in, right? Like, remember that statistic, 4% will move into the middle class, only 4%. So already the odds are heavily stacked against you. But this other side, they're telling you that, you know what, all we want is you, nothing else. And yes, you will have to do this when the time comes, but this is the reward for doing that. And look, your fellow guys are paying that reward, and they are aware that with their 72 virgins. So can you see, right, how somebody, a Kenyan, especially a poor Kenyan, right, but no, it's not mostly poor Kenyans, right, because I think one of the terrorists back in the day was a doctor or something. This guy, Ali Salim Gichunge, scored 335 marks out of 500 in KCPE, right? The wife, Violet Kemuto, she actually looks pretty, right? And this is what the wife said in our, like, her status in our WhatsApp group, wife of Al-Shabaab. She had found her identity as the wife of an Al-Shabaab. And she had settled, because I think she had 3 boyfriends or something after that, before that, right? So you can see how these things work. How somebody would come to you and tell you, you know what, there's this, you're trying too hard here. These people won't accept you. They don't care about you. This is a hypocritical society. Look at this society. It's a society of godly men. Anyway, so just trying to rush. Are people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. When you don't have roots, it affects you deeply. That's what I'm trying to say. I know the quote is for something else, right? And I wanted to give an example of Cardinal Newman. He was an Anglican priest back in the day, Middle Ages, and then he converted into a Catholic priest, and he actually became a cardinal, right? And he actually said this, that when there's a problem, like when there's a difference of doctrine within the Catholic Church, right, that what you do, you need to consult the present church and the church before it. Like, you have to consult everything. Like, what did the guys say in 100 AD? What did they say in 1600 AD? What did they say in 1700 AD? And that's when you become, you can safely determine that this is proper doctrine or this is wrongful doctrine, right? The Marcus Garvey example, where a people without knowledge is like a tree without roots, right? It shows that there is something that came before you, and you need to know it. So when these guys, in my opinion, right, when they find that identity that moves in the past, that moves in the future, where their name would, like, not be forgotten, they'd be like in a long list of matters, that their identity is not only for a specific time but for all time, right? Then that's something they jumped to. they run towards, because they have failed to gain an identity from where they are. They have failed to integrate into society. It can be their failure, it can be our failure to integrate them. Because at times we're mean to people. We're just terribly mean. At times people have to do certain things to be part of us. And it's dehumanizing for them. So they look for other ways. When all they see is hypocrisy, they've been grown up in a certain way, and all they see is hypocrisy around them, then they try to move towards places where there is... Anyway, identity is very, very important. And these guys try to look for that identity, and they find it amongst people who are actually searching for them. So when somebody is lonely around you, loneliness is the only disability. Please talk to them, right? Make people feel welcome. You might change something. You might avert a terrorist attack. So anyway, there's that idea, the last one, that they fight for God, right? There's this argument that's going round. There's this argument that's going round, right? That because certain things affect certain communities, then they cannot be from that community. Like if a religious fanatic is killing his fellow people who are within that religion, then that fanaticism cannot be from that religion. And so my example is like when a mountain hits another mountain, right? They are both still mountains. And that's how the Atlas Mountains formed, right? They're both still mountains. They don't change. It's just that this mountain was moving from this direction, this other mountain was moving from this direction. To claim that a certain ideology is not from your religion, you actually have to put forth verses from your religion. You actually have to mention scripture, events from your religion, from the scriptures within your religion. But one religious fellow harming another religious fellow of the same religion does not mean that you do not belong to the same religion, or that fellow did not get his teaching from that religion. You have to examine deep within, right, from the scriptures. Then comes to the process where people arguing that we are in a constant state we'd be in a constant state of war if a particular, let's say, religion was not a peaceful one. If that was true, then we'd be in a constant state of war. So this is what some guy said. Okay, let me leave that guy. But this is what, let me give you in terms of teaching. There is what we call an eternal law, right? It's within us. Even if a religion is not peaceful, the majority of an adherents would not become violent, because there is an eternal law that exists in every person. In every person. That is why atheism, right, is a very violent philosophy, ideology. But not every atheist is violent, because there's still an eternal law in that atheist that prevents him from being as violent as the other guys are, right? And God put that eternal law there for a purpose, because there are some doctrines, there are some religions that might come and they are not as peaceful as, let's say, others are. But that eternal law, it provides the gravity that ensures that things do not get out of hand. So again, that is not an argument that if a certain religion was not peaceful, then everybody would be at war. That is not an argument. To argue that a certain religion is peaceful, you have to have peaceful verses from that religion. Show them. Because if there are no peaceful religions from verses from that religion, then perhaps it is not a peaceful religion. That is my opinion. Okay, so other people, they just move around and say all religions are the same, because they are afraid of arguing on a particular religion. They are not all the same. And I think I'll talk about this just in a minute or two. Especially when it comes to the end time philosophies, they are not the same. Like in Christianity, it started from a very, very violent beginning, and it moved. It's like a story. You can actually read from Matthew, the first chapter of Matthew. It will show you the lineage of how it moves like a story. This one of the son of this one, this one of the son of this one, and Nahashon is actually part of that lineage. So anyway, as you move through the Bible from the Old Testament to the New Testament, it's a story, and it's moving from a violent beginning to a very, very soft ending, where Christians do not fight, they turn the other cheek. Where in the end times, the angels and Jesus will come to fight for us. We will not fight. We will be lifted up in heaven like the church, right? So those guys. So anyway, that's what I'm saying. They are very, very different. In other religions, the end times means that they will fight, that they will bear arms and fight. So anyway, just continuing, Al-Shabaab says that it fought against, it bombed us in Riverside because of, because Donald Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, right? Honestly, yeah. We're, okay, so anyway, they say that they're bombing us because Donald Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. You'd wonder, go to, oh yeah, and one of the reasons they targeted that Dusit Hotel was because they had they were international interest over there. So that's one of the reasons why they target there, right? So anyway, give an example. So why would moving an embassy to Jerusalem be so bad? Because it's in Israel. And why is Israel so bad? Because it took over Palestinian land. Took over, in quotes, right? Because, yeah, that one I'll say it another day. And it became a state in 1948, and it pushed the Palestinians from their land, right? So there's an entire history on that. I don't want to go into that right now. So anyway, so that was 1948. So if the reason for all of this, what is happening, was what happened in 1948, then that means that before 1948, nothing bad was happening, right? So anyway, just go and research on the Jews of Medina. That was the first time that the Jews, there was a problem between, okay, there was a massacre, not even a fight, but a massacre of Jews by Muslims. And these Jews, they had surrendered. And I think it was 800 people, and they were all beheaded. Just go and research the Jews of Medina, right? It happened in the 8th century, if I'm correct, 8th century. So these things were happening in the 8th century. So is it really the Jerusalem embassy, right? There's so many other examples. In 1066, 5,000 inhabitants in Granada, Spain. Granada that at that time was under the Moors. They were killed. In 1465, like the Jews, thousands of Jews were killed in Fez, Morocco. Only 11 were left alive. In Marrakesh, Morocco, again, 300 Jews were killed between 1864 and 1880. And there are so many that I can't list all of them. So even before Israel, there was a problem. And why was there a problem? Right? So anyway, let me give you, just to finish up. A number of Christian prophets, they have already said that they predicted this attack. Many, okay, I just can't remember the name of the lady, but there's a lady who said that she predicted this attack. Now, that's beside the point. We have Christian preachers who constantly preach about the end times, like Pastor John Hagee, like I think Prophet Awar. It's like they want the end times to be today. They are rushing towards the end times. Catholics believe that the end times started as soon as Jesus left. So we've been in the end times ever since, right? So that's what we believe. So I think that's why Catholics are not in a rush to, for everything to go up to hell. Jehovah's Witnesses believe the end times started in 1918, if I'm right? So, but people rush the end times, especially in Christianity. John Hagee, Prophet Awar, and so many other guys who are preaching that these are the last days. They've been saying that since whatever. So anyway, there are people in Islam who also rush the last days. right? And people like Al-Shabaab, like all these other ISIS, what they're trying to do, that's why they're trying to build a caliphate. They're trying to rush the last days. So they're doing what the Christians are doing, but in a different way. Because for the Christians, they won't fight. Somebody will fight on their behalf. Jesus will come with his angels and fight on his behalf, on their behalf, right? But for the Muslims, they'll fight. So that's why ISIS, yeah. So that's why, or they're kind of like rushing the end times in this way, but the Muslims, they're rushing the end times in this way, like the ISIS and Al-Shabaab, right? So they're trying to rush it. And this trying to rush the end times, it brings this kind of problems, because you are disturbing the balance of the system the way it is. Because perhaps it's not today, so why are you rushing it? And if it's today, why are you still rushing it? Just let it come when it will come, right? So anyway, there's if you read there are signs that the end times will come within Islam, like there'll be a lot of corruption, sexual immorality, the same kind of signs that we have in Christianity, the same around kind of signs, for example. And then the end times for Muslims and Christians are kind of like the same. There'll be a resurrection of the dead, there'll be a final tribulation like judgment, there'll be like separation of the good and the bad, and then the return of Christ. Muslims believe that the Christ will return. How he'll return is different in both religions, but he will return. That's what they preach in both religions, right? So if you read the hadith, it says that on the day of judgment, it will not come until Muslims fight Jews. You get? So that's kind of like why I'm saying that during the end times, how we believe, like us, we don't believe that we'll fight, but according to the hadith, it will not come until X fights Y. You get? Yeah. So there are people who have been trying to rush it ever since, and that's why you'd find that a lot of Ys are being killed by X. Okay, so there have been great moments of peace between Muslims and Jews, and hopefully that there'll continue being great moments of peace. I believe that, like, there's an Imam, it's called Imam Tuahidi, right? I believe that people should listen to him more, because he seems to have a more, like, there's so many problematic verses that I couldn't mention them. I just mentioned this one, right? And his way of interpreting these verses, it's more, it's better. So anyway, there's a lot, and I'm hoping that guys will look introspectively and just look at the verses. These arguments that it can't be X because also X are being killed, it's not an argument. You have to look inherently at X. What does it teach? What does it say? Because it says that these guys will have to fight these guys. Then, yeah, it's a bit difficult. But anyway, check that. And then, yeah, just check that. As always, an eternal law exists in all of us. So there can always be confidence that even if a certain religion is not peaceful, then there cannot be constant war, because there's the eternal law and it governs all of us, right? And then, yeah, so I'll just leave it at that today. All religions are not the same. Study your religion. So I'll leave it at that. Have a good day. Take care. Bye-bye.